I think that Rails hurts because we are using it wrong, and we'll try to fix a little bit of it today. So a little bit about me. I did my first project, first Rails project in 2006. I've been into freelancing, organizing agencies and conferences. I'm a former GitLab developer advocate. So yeah, these days I'm teaching junior developers at online school Good Programmer. From time to time, I organize online internships for Rubyists. And I also have a thing called SkillGrid Virtual Agency, where I help experienced Ruby developers to start working remotely. And I also live in Serbia. So as a GitLab developer advocate, I have a live supply of stickers, even though I'm former GitLab developer advocate. So you can catch me and grab a few stickers. I don't know if you have heard, but there are rumors that Microsoft is buying GitHub. So if you get a sticker now, you could tell everyone that you loved GitLab before it became popular. So, and I want to start with this picture. I drew it 4 years ago. And yeah, this briefly described my understanding of the Rails community in these days. And because of this understanding, I also started the project, which called Rails Hurts. And my idea was to try to understand why it hurts and maybe to fix it. But unfortunately, I didn't do Rails a lot after that, so the whole project was on hold for a while. And until recently, I decided to refresh my knowledge of Rails. And suddenly I realized that actually not much stuff changed. So the picture from 4 years ago, it completely described the situation today. So, and while I was preparing, this is why I decided to give another talk. And while I was preparing to my talk, I drew another picture, and I called it the life cycle of Rails developer. And let's start from the first phase. The picture describes, we'll probably start from this phase, where we think that Rails is amazing, then we get into some problems, and then we get into some serious problems, and we maybe start questioning ourselves whether we are good programmers or not. Then we fix our problems with some Rails magic, and then we think that Rails is amazing again. And we go all over this cycle a few times until Rails hits us really hard. And then we switch to the next stage. Then we start to think that, yeah, Rails sucks, for sure. Then we start to look around and quickly find solid principles, clean architecture, design patterns, and all of this. And we start to think that maybe we should imply them. And we, no. Yeah. So we start to try services and form objects. And if it's not enough for us, we also try entities and repositories. And there are two side paths for the smart enough people who are able to develop something on their own. So this part is for this guy specifically, and this one is for Luka and Piotr Solnitsa. So, but for the rest of us, there are not so many options. We can simply try their tools and see if they fits us. And there is also another option that maybe we start questioning ourselves. Maybe we misunderstood Rails and we return to the first phase. And what happens next? If you still found no joy, then you go to the phase 3, where the hope is lost. So you tried everything, you're tired of everything, no joy, and there are options now. So you can switch to another language, or you can shift the paradigm completely, so that you will have a new landscape of problems, but the old problems, they are not for you anymore. So, for example, serverless, microservices, event sourcing, This is a paradigm shift. And if you're consistent enough, then you can keep trying to develop your own ideal architecture. And recently, I realized that there is a next phase of a Rails developer. When a person have tried different languages, different approaches, and learn a lot of stuff about it, and now understood how to use Rails properly, so which parts are harmful and which are not. And I was lucky enough to attend a workshop of this guy. His name is Kirill Makevnin. He is the CTO of Hexlet. And Hexlet is an educational platform for programmers. And here are some characteristics of their project. And it's quite something. So for 6 years, only 1 or 2 developers were developing this code base, and the scope of the project has changed pretty often. So what I learned there made a lot of sense for me, and it was like, this guy is telling me the contents of the book I always wanted to write. So before we dive into the Rails way, I want to show you a few slides with a survey. Unfortunately, we got not too many responses, but anyway, so you can see and make your own reasoning about it. So the most of us there on the phase 2 and phase 3 probably, yeah. And the next one, yeah. So most of people are, we have 30% who are happy with Rails, and for another 30% it's okay. And yeah, we can say again that service objects is a normal thing in the Rails community. All right, and let's finally investigate some Rails way stuff. Let's develop a small application, and we need to implement this form. We have a username, we have an address. To show a nice map with a user location, we have to confirm email, and we have to agree with terms of services. So we might end up having something like this. We put these validations and this geocoding thing. And then we get another set of requirements where we need to be able to edit our profiles. We also remember that we need to downcase username and to set the default profile color. And there should be also a moderation mode. And the moderator can edit and create users, but they should feel professional and workplace. So we add some code to make it work. We make some of the conditionals, some of the validations conditional. We also add this auto accessor here to identify whether we in moderation mode or not. And we also add these 2 callbacks to handle these cases where we need to set the default color and strip the username. And the final requirement we want to implement is this little tiny checkbox. So when user marks it, we also want to create a default organization for this user. And to do so, we introduce another auto accessor, we introduce another callback, and we introduce another method that actually creates the organization. So, and this is what we got. We covered 4 scenarios, and these are these 4 scenarios. And what I did, I made a list of the stuff we are going through and marked the, so you can see in a different scenario, we call a different set of these, you can say functions, things, features. Yeah, so what we did, we introduced a lot of conditionals just to satisfy these requirements. And I made a little experiment. So I took this code, I put it into the code climate, and code climate says this code is completely perfect. Then I did this thing. So as you can see, the only reason we put that code into the model is to be able to call a person.save in our controllers. So I rewrote this code and made it explicit. So now we have this save object method, and now we have all these conditions, and they're explicitly visible. And after I put this code to the code climate, of course, it found a problem here. So what we did is that we introduced a lot of conditional logic, but we made it implicit because all of these features of Rails, they mask the conditions. All right, the next part. One day, I had an idea that probably it would be cool to start contributing to open source Rails projects and to learn from it how to organize the code properly. And I never did that until recently. I found, if you follow this link, you will see 5 models from different popular Rails open source projects. And these models are huge. And I think the reason why they're huge, because of this decision-making process. So we know that there are 3 layers. If something doesn't go to the view, then if it doesn't go to a controller, then it should go to a model. So, and remember this method, we introduced it to cover a single scenario to create an organization. And these models are full of methods like this. And it looks, when you add methods like this into your models, here's how the situation looks like. So you have a lot of controllers, a lot of actions in controllers, and you have a corresponding method to a single action. So your model responsibility becomes more wider and wider, so it knows about a lot of stuff. You've probably seen this picture before. So the first one is old school PHP code. The second was lasagna-oriented architecture. It is what Rails is supposed to be. And the last one is ravioli-oriented architecture, aka microservices. And let me show you what kind of layered architecture we have in the most Rails application. So let's say we have a lot of stuff, and we want to organize it in layers. And we start from the easy part. We take a layer of controllers, and we nicely put a layer of views on top of it. But then, so far so good. But then we probably get tired or distracted or something, and we take the rest, and we mix it into the same pot, and we boil it, and we have something like this. I know it looks nice, I know it's tasty, but it's not a layered architecture, right? So let's make it official. The borscht-oriented architecture, it's a typical Rails application. All right, so before we dive deeper, I want to tell you about one simple task we are giving to every student in our online school. And the task is to implement a credit request utility. So the user provides parameters like age, income, credit history, and our tool should say whether a credit request is approved or not. So it looks something like this. And the implementation is trivial, so they have a class and methods, and it's pretty trivial. So they end up having something like this. And who can tell me what is wrong with this solution? Anyone can spot a problem here? Yeah? What? All right, another attempt. Any more ideas? What do you mean? All right, so ideas are like it's not single responsibility, but there is a much more serious problem, actually. Yeah.
I guess that there are some properties are path properties and some properties are arguments for those.
No, that's not that's. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, correctly. That's the point. So what this class does, it outputs the answer exactly to std out. If you didn't know that these lines are equivalent to this, so it turns out that our class, which is supposed to calculate to make a decision about credit request, it knows about external world. It knows that there is a user and there is a std out, and it knows that it can send messages to the user of this tool. So it's I wanted to say that it is an obvious mistake, but now I can't say this. All right, this is a mistake we are doing even more often when we work with the bigger applications like Rails, for example. And yeah, to start solving this problem, let's take a look at this picture of layered architecture from Martin Fowler's website. We remember that models, views, and controllers are supposed to be layers. And let's simplify this picture. So I've seen this picture before, but I never really understood it. So let's simplify it. The thing in the middle, it's simply a database. Then there is a layer of active record models. Then there is a service layer. And as we know, now most of the Rails developers agree that that should be a service layer to organize the code. And the stuff on the top, we can say that this is kind of a controller stuff. And the problem with services is that everyone understands something specific under it, but this is what we mean under the service layer. So service encapsulates a single process of our business, and what is important that all interaction with external world goes into this layer of services. So what this schema means? It means that knowledge should flow only in one direction. It is an obvious thing for us that database shouldn't know anything about models, right? And the same goes for controllers. We shouldn't know, our models shouldn't know about the stuff on the controller layers. And the services shouldn't know about controller stuff. And we can draw it like this to make it even more obvious. So database layer is under the models, so it can jump on the next level. But models can pick up stuff from the database, and so on goes for all of them. But we usually violate this simple and primitive principle. We do stuff like this, for example. In our models, we start to call services, and we introduce circular dependencies with this simple code. Or we start using gems like active admin or access API or other gems, which introduce view-related stuff into the model layer. So, and we can even do stuff like this. So this is DHH advocating for global variables in his screencast of how they develop Basecamp. So he basically says that, all right, let's take a current user from a controller layer, and with a global variable, let's introduce this concept on the model layer. So if we do stuff like this, our software is no longer modular, because modularity means lack of circular dependencies. All right. Another thing. So this is code what we've got. And let's take a look. Try to identify different, let's say, responsibilities. And for example, these two lines, these two validations, these are not business logic validations. These are application logic validations. Let me explain you what I mean. So if you have to confirm password or email, is it related to your business domain? This one is not so obvious. It might be a part of your business domain, but this checkbox also could mean like that you don't want to make user pass if it's not checked. And the captcha, it is also an example of application logic. It has nothing to do with your application, with your business domain. All right. Geocoding. This is interaction with external world. This is in our model. This part, we don't know what to do with it yet, but let's just highlight it. And also, this is the data. This is called data filtering, where we want to prepare our data before saving it into the database. And this is here we're setting the default value. And as far as I remember, constructors were a good place to put default values, but we don't use them for some reason. All right, and to untangle all of the above, let's remember what is a domain model. Because DHH in his Rails doctrine mentions this term twice, but I think this term has lost its real meaning. Remember the school days? So we were not able to work with real atoms or electrons or molecules, so we were working with the models of them. And you can draw a model on a whiteboard. You can implement your model in any language and use any framework, but it shouldn't depend on a framework or on a language. So this is what I call a domain model. But this is not a domain model. This model contains a lot of implementation and a lot of dependency. This is not a domain model. All right, let's try to make it a domain model. Let's throw away a lot of the stuff. Let's extract most of the stuff into the service. And we call geocoder here explicitly. And we prepare all the params. And then we create a person. And this model we probably can call a domain model now. Then we have to handle this application logic. And to do so, we use a form object. And I should have give you a link about details of implementation of this logic, but the idea is simple. You simply trick Rails to think that this is still the same object, but you use this object as a form object, not as active record model. But you actually can use it as an active record model. So let me show you how we use it. So we use this object, and if it's valid, we call this service with the parameters. And also we need to handle this create organization scenario. And to do so, we introduce a new layer. And this layer is called mutators. And the single purpose of this layer is to handle this logic where you pick in a lot of parameters and put in the proper places while saving stuff into active record model. So on this layer, all you do is you simply pick these parameters and shuffle them around. And the only thing it should do is to return a properly prepared object. So it shouldn't be in some kind of a broken state. So if you call this mutator, then you should be 100% sure that you get a valid and correctly formed object. So now within the service, we call this mutator. And we can go further. We can take a look at this code we have here and notice that it does kind of the same stuff. Yeah, so we can take all of this logic, which works with the parameters, and simply move it to mutator. And now our servers look compact. It simply works with the geocoding service, and it works with 2 mutators. These 2 lines, they could be extracted into form object, but we will not do that for now. And the update scenario is actually trivial. We don't need services here. We don't need mutators. We simply pick active record model, and we use it as usually. And in the moderation mode, it's not that simple. Again, we use form object, another form object. We add another validation there. And now we use this form object. And in one case, in case of creation, we use person service to create an object. And in case of update, we use this object as if it would be a simple active record model. So what we get is this kind of architecture. So we get database layer, then models, then the layer of mutators, then the layer of services and controllers. And there is this stuff around which we can use optionally. So let me make a quick summary of what we've got. So the purpose of the layers. Models, we treat them as domain models. They contain relations and business rules. They can also contain things like state machines, for example. And mutators, they handle creation, basically update logic and creation logic, and so that we always operate with objects in the correct state. Services, they handle business operation logics and interaction with external services. Also stuff like triggering some jobs also goes there, or sending emails, it's also here. And form objects to handle application logic, use case validation, specific rules, defaults, and filters. So what we had before, it looks something like this. So the request went to controller, then it jumped multiple times between different conditions, then it goes to a model, and then again, something like pinball happens there, optional interaction with external service, and the request goes back, and then we also render a view, probably with few conditions. What we've got looks more like this. So now, instead of putting stuff inside, we put everything in layers explicitly. So now the request goes into controller, it calls service, it can call mutator, mutator works with the model, it can work with another mutator, service can call external service, and then it goes back to control, and then it returns a view. Optionally, we could wrap our parameters with form object here, and of course we can use presenter here. So what we've got here is that we also got lazy main CQRS here, because queries in terms of CQRS are scopes, and they're perfect, they're immutable, and we should rely on them. And as for comments, we now have a layer of mutators. So that's good. And we have quite a lot of flexibility in our controllers, because we don't have to create a service for every use case. If it's trivial, simply use model. If it becomes more complex, use service, or use mutator, or use service, which triggers, which handles work with external service, or different mutators. And notice that services and mutators are just functions. So there is no such thing like a service object. I mean, that object I showed you, it was just a container for multiple functions, and every single function is just one service. So what we've got, instead of Borsch here, is more like this. So it's kind of much more structured, but it allows us a decent amount of laziness. This is what we love Rails for. And maybe even something like this, because with this code, with this kind of architecture, you have to think much more about where the stuff should go. So, and it will be hard at the beginning, but when you get it, it will be much easier. All right, and we are getting to the final part of my talk, finally. And I had a question. So after I drew this, this diagram, which I showed you at the beginning, I questioned myself, where is DHH on that graph? And obviously, he should be on this spot, right? But then I thought, well, it couldn't be possible that he doesn't have any problems. So probably he has some problems. And what he does when he has some problems, then he develops concerns and he fixes his problem with concern, and Rails is amazing again. But then I thought, well, it couldn't be that simple. Probably it's not this, there are different kinds of problems. And then DHH got a problem that he had to pass too many parameters. And then this is the basic algorithm. And yeah, that he had to pass too many parameters. And then he introduces globals as a first-class citizen into the Rails. And he fixes his problem with globals. And Rails is amazing again. And this is where I catch a serious aha moment, actually. So it turns out that, let me also show this thing. So this is a quote from Rails doctrine as well. So DHH compares the discovery of Ruby with the finding of a magical glove. And I realized that this is actually how he built Rails. So this is not where it all started, not with concerns, not with globals. It's all started earlier, probably with something like application logic validators, which looked pretty innocent. So, and let me express it like this. So imagine he found this magic glove, and with this magic glove, he casts the spell of level 1, and he introduces the application logic validators. But it also might cause some problems. And then he invents another thing, and he uses the magic of level 2. And then it goes further and further, and now we are already using magic of level 10 or 20 or 15, I don't know. And we have globals in our Rails applications now. And I have a bad news for you, because I think the amount of magic in the air, we are running out of it, basically. So if we're already using globals, there's only one thing which is left, and which is we can rely on as a exactly. So the only thing which should save us is a GoTo. Luckily, there is already an implementation of GoTo in Ruby. So someone please create a pull request, and we'll get the final magic into Rails, and the cycle will be complete. So speaking seriously, I think Rails needs a stronger voice of the community. I think if we take a look at the situation in Rails community from a political perspective, then unfortunately it looks like a dictatorship. We have a single person who makes all important decisions about the future of Rails, and the majority of us, we are passive. That's the problem. So It's one of the options. Yeah, we can someone could fork Rails, but it's also a lot of job. Well, please do that. That's one of the options. Yeah, of course, we could fork Rails. Another option is to take a look at other communities. How do they make decisions and probably raise the discussion? But what I do, my current way of dealing with it is that I'm trying to understand how to live with Rails in its current state right now, and to educate people around me. And maybe if we will be more educated, this shift towards the new and shiny Rails will become smoothly and naturally. I don't know. Everything is possible. So maybe there are options, of course. Maybe in a few years we will become happy Elixir developers as well, and Rails will become a new Perl, and they will have, of course, we will have conferences yet, like Perl has. They have 2 conferences now, one in Europe and one in United States. But that's it. So, but while we are here, I think, while we considering ourselves as a Ruby developer, as a part of Rails community, we should care about its future, and that's mostly it. If you're interested about stuff I'm doing, you can go to this website and leave your email there and get notifications about new posts and discoveries I will find. You can also follow these 2 Twitter accounts. This is also my Telegram if you want to reach me out. I have GitLab stickers. As I said, so reach me out. I will also put some of them around. And I have GitLab power banks like this. I have 10 of them. And I will give them to those who are brave enough to show me their Rails code. So I'm curious to learn how do people organize code in their Rails application. So yesterday I learned a lot about it. And I'll be in Kyiv until June 7th. And if you want to reach me out, I'll be here. So thank you. That's it.